And we're back with Terry with a few more questions to finish this video set off. And so we were talking about Scripture earlier, and the questions I have are about the King James Version Bible only, because there's a lot of King James Version Bible people out there. A few questions. I'll give them to you all at once, maybe. But does the King James Version Bible have deceptions within its pages? Is the King James Version Bible the entire Bible? Are the 66 books, that's it? And well, let's just deal with those two questions for now.
Well, is the King James Version Bible deceptive? I would say, again, no. And reason
mistranslations, misrepresentations, any mistranslations, misrepresentations?
Well, here's the thing with that is, well, first of all, like I said, it goes back to what it says in 1 Corinthians as far as the natural man receiveth not unless he has the Spirit, okay? Because everything's spiritually discerned. Second of all, what most people fail to realize is when you're in the Old Testament, or actually it should be called the Old Covenant, reading it, and the New Testament or New Covenant. In the Old Testament, you should be reading, or Old Covenant, you should be applying your Hebrew definitions to a lot of the words to get a true understanding of it. Unless you do that, it's just like in the English language. There's a lot of words that we speak that we have no idea what they mean. And that being the case, we look in the dictionary to find out what's the meaning of the word. Well, it's the same way with the Greek and Hebrew. When you read the Old Testament or Old Covenant, you need to have either an understanding of Hebrew, and if you don't, have a Strong's Concordance to find out what that understanding is. And in the New Covenant, you got to use the Greek. And the thing about the Greek is my land. In some instances, you can have 10 words, meanings for the one word. And the only way to find out what is the true meaning is find that same word in the Old Covenant, find out what the Hebrew word was then, and apply it with the New. A prime example, you talk about, people talk about the rapture, and they change the word caught up to mean rapture. Well, when you use that same word that's used there, and you put it back in the Hebrew, it means a gathering. It means nothing about being caught up or rapture or anything else. It talks about a gathering. So it would be an end-time gathering and not a end-time rapture.
Where did they get the, I always hear about harpazo. We're going to be, harpazo means rapture or whatever.
Same thing. They will jump to the Latin, they'll jump to the Greek, and they'll, Aramaic, and people will do anything to make their point, even if it means changing scripture, changing meaning of words, or picking out of that group of 10 the word that best suits them. I'll give you a prime example. There's a man, Rick Warren, he wrote the book Purpose Driven Life, okay? Yeah, well, I feel the same way. But either way, he used 29 different Bibles, and he picked the verses out of each one of those 29 that best suited his purpose as far as what he was writing in a given paragraph or whatever, or so he could use Scripture to represent what he was trying to say. Well, for crying out loud, if you look hard enough, you can find just about any book that will eventually say what you want it to say. Well, it's the same thing here. I would say I'm a King James man myself, and the only reason I stick with the King James is because the closest thing to the King James is the American Standard Version, and there was like 186,000 changes done to it compared to the King James.
Wow.
So, how they change phrases or how they change names, and then you got to keep in mind, in the Hebrew, there was no punctuation. And in the Greek, there was no, how Yahuah and Yahusha, you had the Y and Y-A-H-U-A-H for Yahuah, or Yahu, which is U-A-U, Yahuah, which means I am. There was no letter Y, there was no letter J, there was no W's. The letter J is just a little over 500 years old, maybe 506 years old. The letter W is only a couple hundred, years old. And Switzerland just added the W to their alphabet here a few years back. So you can see the translation into the different languages. That's what has been bringing about the deceptions. And once you find out what has been done and you apply it correctly, you will find out that things mean exactly what they mean in Scripture. But you've got to be able to do that. And you can't do that just by picking it up and reading it like another book.
Yeah. Well, okay, now I wanted to make sure I asked you about the 66 books and the 81 books in the Ethiopian canon and the Book of Enoch, Jubilees, etc., not being in the 66-book canon. What's your feeling on that?
My feeling on that was that the Roman Catholic Church and Constantine did Yahuwah's creation a major disservice, because when they canonized the Bible, they purposely did it for one thing. Prior to that, mankind didn't have, for hundreds of years, mankind did not have a copy of the Bible. If they wanted to know what was in it, they had to go to a priest or the Pope or whatever to find out what it said. They told them what it said. Well, when it got to the point to where, it was going to be taught or copied, and where people could get a copy of the Scriptures, you know what? That it was canonized for the sole purpose of them still being able to have control over the masses. And that's just like Satan. He wanted to have control. Satan pulled the same trick that the Father pulled on him. The Father told Satan, there's some things that you'll never know, that you don't know all things. Okay? Well, Satan turned right around and did it to Yahuwah's creation. He said, well, you may know some things, but you don't know all things because I got them locked up in the Vatican. Well, hey, that's fine. The Father still has a way of getting the truth out to His creation. So the Vatican can lock up all whatever they want. But they purposely took those other books out of the Bible, and they ended up with the 66. But they purposely took them out of there, and they did it for a matter of control, to control the people.
So do you think the canon tops out at 81, or do you think there's maybe 181?
Well, there could very well be more books out there. I mean, look, what was it, back in the 1940s when they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, 47 or 50 something like that, maybe it's in the 50s, 40s or 50s, I can't remember what, where they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, and is there more out there? It very well could be. That I don't know. But I do know this. The Father has allowed us to have what we have. In even the Book of Enoch, we have that, Jubilees, Jasher, which actually Yahusha and different ones in Scripture talked about those particular three books, Enoch, Jasher, and Jubilees. So that right there ought to tell you that those books, at least them books, which is not a part of the Apocrypha, but you even have the Apocrypha. You got those books there too that others can read. And I'm sure there's some validity in them also. I tell you, I look to the King James, the 66 books. I read the Book of Enoch, Jubilees, Jasher, only because it was mentioned in Scripture by Yahusha and others. It was mentioned. So I do look to those books, and at different times I've looked in my studies as a pastor putting together a sermon. I've used different things out of the other books, out of the Apocrypha and things that were mentioned. But again, I did it the same way everybody else does it. I used it for my purpose. But I did use it, and I have read them. And they are an interesting read. And when you read them, I mean, you find out about the other archangels when you start reading the Apocryphas and things like that. Raphael and the different archangels and things that are mentioned, which aren't mentioned in the name.
It's pretty hard to find out a lot about the fallen angels. I mean, the Book of Enoch really describes, the fallen angels, and does, really, it's an eye-opener for anybody who hasn't read it. So let's go with the final question I'm going to give you, final question on Scripture anyway. There's been a lot of talk about the sacred name, and so I'm going to ask you, is the sacred name a deception? Or, vice versa, is Jesus and God the deception?
Well, when you start doing a study on the sacred name, some people will bring up and say Yahweh and Yahuah and Jesus and all of these are the sacred name. And then you have those like myself that's done the study that show where it actually shows that Yah, Y-A-H-H, and Yahuah, when it's actually spelled the right way, it sounded as Yahuah, using the U-A-U in the Hebrew. Using the Paleo Hebrew, you got to look at that and convert them back. It really doesn't take that big of an extensive study to find out what is the true name, and it's just that some people choose to do it and some people choose not to. I've talked to others about this and shared with them in Scripture. I did a Bible study. I've done YouTube videos on the sacred name, and even have a handout that people can, the Bible lesson itself, where people can download themselves and have it in their own hands and do the comparison themselves. But, some people, it's just like I've had them tell me, well, I grew up with Jesus, and as far as I'm concerned, it's Jesus and Jesus only. Well, that's fine. And they say they've grown up, going to church on Sunday, and Sunday's the true Sabbath, even though the Father in the Ten Commandments, commandment number 4 is the only commandment he told everybody to remember, which was remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. And when you find out when the true Sabbath is, and you're not keeping that Sabbath holy, then who's at fault? When you find out the truth, or someone tells you the truth, you are obligated to check that out to see if what is being said is true, just like the Berean Christians did. They even questioned what the apostles said. But it says in Scripture that the Berean Christians went home and searched the Scriptures to see if what they were told was true. And as Yahuwah's creation, every person is obligated to do that exact same thing. I'm not telling you, well, you need to start calling the Father Yahuwah and the Messiah Yahusha. I'm telling you, you better check it out. Work, as Paul said, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. You're not going to get to heaven on my name, and I'm not going to get to heaven on yours. I'm going to spend eternity in the right place based upon what I did in my life. Period.
All right. So, anything further you want to add before we play a little question and answer period that maybe you won't be prepared for?
Well, I would say, we only have a few seconds here, but I would say I would search out the true name of the Father and of the Son. And when you do so, there's different places online that you can go to, and if anybody needs to know what those places are, they can get a hold of you through your website or whatever, and we can direct them to where they need to go to find the answers to their questions and the right